Hello. This is your recorded lesson for today. It's on pronunciation. I shouldn't have called it classical and ecclesiastical pronunciation. It's just kind of on pronunciation in general. Um, but classical versus ecclesiastical is a part of it. What we are going to be talking about is macrons. So, how does having a macron on a letter influence how that letter is said or how that word is said? We're going to talk about classical and ecclesiastical Latin and how they're different from each other. And then there is one objective for this lesson, and it is I will be able to read a short, familiar passage. This will be the Our Father, is what that passage is going to be, in either pronunciation. So you're going to be able to do that by the end of this lesson, or after a little bit of practice after the end of this lesson, at the very least. Okay? So we're going to start with the macrons. And so if you've had Spanish, you know that the vowels are a, e, o, and u. The names of the letters, when you actually say the alphabet, are a, e, o, u, and the sound that they make is their name, a, e, o, u. Okay? So if you remember that from Spanish, if you've had Spanish and remember that from Spanish, those are the sounds that the letters make when they have macrons on them. But there are short vowel sounds, and you may recall long A, short A when you were learning how to read in lower elementary school. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Okay, so if you click on this big button, on these big buttons, it's going to tell you all the vowel sounds all straight down. So
A, E, O, U.
Okay, if you click on the little buttons, it's going to pronounce the example word that goes with that letter. So if you want to hear what sounds like in a word,
Roma.
Roma. Okay, so those are the long vowel sounds, but the short ones, let's give them a listen and let's see how they compare. Starting with A. Okay, so an A without a macron.
Puella.
Puella, ah, ah. That's the difference that we're dealing with the letter A. They're not terribly different from each other, only with the length of time that you say it. Although some of the other letters, they'll actually sound a little different, more than just the length being different. So let's go to E now.
Habet.
Habet, et. So it's like get.
Habera.
Habera. So e, ah. Okay, let's move down to the letter I.
Laudavit.
Laudavit. It as in sit.
Laudavit.
Laudavit. So it's E. So it and E sound very different, or sound pretty different from each other. And A sound pretty different from each other. And puella, and they sound a bit more similar, and it's more about the length for the letter A. Okay, let's move down to O.
Propter.
Propter.
Inopido.
Inopido. So it's So as in prop or cop, and O as in opido, as in opido, which means in the town. So it's an versus O.
Amicus.
Amicus. As in up.
Manu.
Manu. So it's versus oo. Those are two very different sounds. The letter U is the one that I think that sound the most different with and without a macron. And if we click on the top, we'll hear the short vowel sounds all in a row.
A, E, O, U.
A, e, I, o, A, E, O, U. And so in classical Latin, these are the different sounds that will need to be made. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this. Will come back when we start talking about ecclesiastical pronunciation. Okay, so you can play with this as often as you need, and I'd also suggest that you think of some English words that have that sound in them. So let's take a look at the next. Can chat about this too before maybe going on to the next slide. Maybe the sub will pause the video briefly, but I've kind of already answered this question actually. But let's see who is listening and who can rehash. Which letters sound the most different with and without a macron? Which letters seem most similar? Just lengthening of the same sound. Okay, on this one, you're going to give it a try. So there is a correct word, the word shown next to the green check mark, and it gives the meaning of the word. So dedit means gave. The red is a misspelling, so either putting in a macron where it doesn't belong or taking a macron that should be there and removing it. So it's a misspelling with macrons of the word. And then there's going to be, when you click the button, a pronunciation of the wrong way, or some of them have two wrong pronunciations, with the pronunciation of the correct way. So I want you to, with a partner, look back at this previous slide if you need to, but try to pronounce the word that's wrong the right way as it's shown, if that makes sense. So try to pronounce this word, and then so I'm going to model this one for you. Okay, so long A is habera, so it's A. So this word would be pronounced dedit, and that's no macron, so it's not dedit, it's dedit, just it. So of course, dedit is the wrong way to say it, but it's the correct way to pronounce that word, if that's how you're going to spell it, if that makes sense. The correct way to pronounce it would be just dedit, just an dedit. And then you can click the button to see if you were right. Here's how it's going to sound.
Non dedit, said dedit.
Non dedit. So that means not dedit, said means but dedit. So it's going to tell you the wrong way. It's gonna give you the wrong way to pronounce it and say it's not that, but it's this correct way. So try to pronounce the words first, both words, the incorrect one and the correct one first, and then click the button. Okay, so we're going to move on to ecclesiastical pronunciation and classical pronunciation. So classical pronunciation is what I use in class unless we're doing prayers, in which case I will use the ecclesiastical pronunciation because no one likes to say Ave Maria gratia plena. Sounds better to use ecclesiastical pronunciation for our prayers. But I use classical pronunciation otherwise, and that way you get exposed to both because Mr. Rundy uses ecclesiastical pronunciation. Classical pronunciation was spoken by the Romans in the time of Christ, and because Judea was a Roman province, there were a lot of Roman citizens that lived there. So not only military people, but even non-military people. Sometimes some military families, just like today, lived in them in whatever province they were stationed in. And a lot of other Romans running around too. So it wasn't just Jews in the Holy Land. And because of this, it's actually kind of reasonable to presume that Christ knew a little bit of Latin. And to whatever extent he may have spoken some Latin from time to time with certain people, if he did, the Latin he would have spoken would have been classical pronunciation, because the ecclesiastical pronunciation didn't develop until hundreds of years later. So another reason that you want to be exposed to classical pronunciation is that many quality Latin resources use classical pronunciation. So sometimes Latin is taught just as as a way of taking what's written on a page and interpreting it. And so there really is no sound involved. It's just I see this written word and I know it means this. But there's a lot of good resources out there for speaking Latin back and forth. And those resources, a lot of them on YouTube, many of them use the classical pronunciation. And so it's helpful to be exposed to that so you're not confused when you hear words being pronounced differently. Okay, of course, the ecclesiastical pronunciation, you know this already, used in the church. It developed between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Middle Ages. And it's very similar to how Italian is pronounced. So a lot of times you'll hear the ch sound, like amici for friends, and amici is friends in Italian too. So some of the words are exactly the same because basically it's a middle version between Latin, between classical pronunciation of Latin and modern Italian. So let's take a look at how they differ. So I have 2 pages of these. So basically 6 ways. There's more than 6. I'm not giving you all of them, but I'm picking out some of the big ones. And so these are some of the big ways in which they differ. Okay, but it's kind of like English, American English and British English. 2 people, one who speaks American English, one who speaks British English, can have a conversation with each other, a perfect conversation with each other. That's exactly the same with classical and ecclesiastical pronunciation. Okay. So the first difference is with the letter C. In classical pronunciation, a C always makes the k sound and only ever makes a k sound, 100% all the time. And so what we'll have for each of these is a line of text from a familiar prayer that shows that it exemplifies that difference. So here we have a line from the Pater Noster on both of these. This one will be said as if it were in classical pronunciation, and this one in ecclesiastical. So let's give it a listen.
Pater Noster, qui est in caelis, sanctificetur nomen tuum.
It's making a k sound both of those times. Now, in ecclesiastical pronunciation, the C can sometimes make a k sound too, but in certain cases, it makes a ch sound. So this particular line, both of the letter C's make that ch sound. So when does it make a ch sound? When it comes before the letters E, I, or O. And of course, it comes before the letters E, I, or O in both of these words.
Pater Noster, qui est in caelis, sanctificetur nomen tuum.
All right. The next one is vowel sounds. So what we just talked about with the vowel sounds, this is how classical pronunciation works, with long vowels and short vowels. For each vowel has a long and a short version, and this is how they sound. Okay, with classical pronunciation, the vowels started to all kind of get lengthened. So it's not that you never hear any short vowel sounds in ecclesiastical pronunciation, but all of them started to just shift a little bit towards the lengthening. And that, of course, didn't happen all at once. There were many centuries while this change was happening slowly. It's kind of like continental drift. The continents are always moving, but from year to year, it doesn't really look like it. Or from even lifetime to lifetime, it doesn't look like it. Okay, and so I'll give you some examples going forward of that. Okay, so the next difference is with the letter V. In classical, I think classical is a little bit easier because with ecclesiastical, you have to kind of look at, does this letter make this sound here or does it make that sound here? With classical, it's always the same. So the letter V always makes a W sound, a W sound.
Adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua.
And then with the ecclesiastical pronunciation, it always makes, so here's at least an easy one, it always makes a V sound.
Adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua.
Okay, So there were some pronunciation differences between these two sentences here, besides the V, and there were some vowel differences. Okay, so for example, this O does not have a macron on it. So it'd be like as in cop, right? Voluntas tua. But if you notice that in ecclesiastical pronunciation, I want you to imagine every vowel has a macron on it. No, you don't actually write the macrons in ecclesiastical pronunciation, but you would say them as if they had this, because they're all going to become lengthened vowels. So instead of voluntas, it'd be voluntas.
Advenia regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua.
Voluntas, even though this one would be voluntas, voluntas. And it's not that with vowels you can't sort of lengthen a vowel a little bit when you're speaking in classical pronunciation. Okay, it's not really one or the other, it's just kind of a continuum. But over time, that continuum, those vowels became pretty much to be used all lengthened. And that makes sense because Spanish is modern Latin, the way it was spoken in the province of Hispania. And it's Spanish, that when you learn Spanish, you learn that all the vowels make only one sound, a, e, o, u, right? So that kind of makes sense that that's what was happening over time. And Italian is the same way. They have the 5 vowels and they make the sounds a, e, o, u. So we're just kind of getting rid of those short vowels. Okay, in the second page, G always makes a G sound in classical pronunciation.
Filium Dei unigenitum.
But it sometimes makes a J sound when before E or I.
Filium Dei unigenitum.
So unigenitum, it's before the letter E here, so it's making a J sound. Okay, and again, the G can make a G sound in ecclesiastical pronunciation when it's not before E or I, so it can still be both. Okay, the letters T and I, when we have a word with T followed by I, in classical pronunciation, it's pretty simple. The T makes a T sound, the I makes an I sound, and they both get said separately.
Et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo.
Oh, I went a little further there. Okay. But in classic or in ecclesiastical pronunciation, it's going to become a TS sound. Tss.
Et ne nos inducas in tentationem.
In tentationem. And that kind of makes it sound more Italian, doesn't it? So it makes sense. We're getting closer to modern Italian the further into history we go. So the further into the Middle Ages we get. Except in Italian, they started writing words like that with a Z. So the letter Z is what makes the T sound, the TS sound. It's kind of like pizza. And then the last one, GN. So G makes a G sound in classical Latin, and the N obviously makes a N sound. And so if you had a G and an N, you'd have to say both of those sounds separately.
Agnus Dei qui tollis peccata mundi.
So Agnus Dei qui tollis peccata mundi. So notice that this was tollis. Here we're going to say tollis as if that I had a macron on it. And of course, the GN is going to make a different sound too. So the GN in ecclesiastical pronunciation is going to make kind of like an Nye sound. For those of you who have taken Spanish, or for those of you who haven't, it's just an NY. So let's take a listen.
Agnus Dei qui tollis peccata mundi.
So notice I said tollis here, tollis here. So there were more than just the GN difference in the way that these two sentences were said. Okay, so again, play around with that as much as you need before this assignment. On this next page, you've got 2 videos of the Apostles' Creed, Symbolum Apostolorum. Oh, look, there's a genitive plural there of the apostles. one in ecclesiastical pronunciation, the way you might be familiar with it, if you are familiar with it in Latin, and then one in classical pronunciation. I do have to say, though, the classical pronunciation doesn't do the V change. So it's I tried to find a better version of that. But it still has the V's as V sound, not as W sounds. So it's not true classical pronunciation in that first video. Okay, and the last page here. So you're going to listen to my recording. Everything that we've talked about in this video so far is being demonstrated here as I read the Our Father. Okay, it says, listen to my recording, then record yourself reading the Pater Noster in each pronunciation style. It does not have to be perfect, the one that you do, okay? But it should demonstrate that you understand some of the differences. And then practice it before doing your recording. So I'm not going to waste time in this video by playing it for you. You can do that on your own time. But notice here that with the yellow highlighting are the C's and the V's. I don't think there were any. Yeah, there are no G's in the Pater Noster. There's a T for a tentationem versus tentationem. And then also, I didn't highlight every vowel, obviously, but I highlighted some that I'd like you to try to pronounce differently. So nostrum for classical and nostrum for ecclesiastical. Okay, so there's another U over here. There's an I that I'd like you to practice saying nobis versus nobis, and then an E here. Okay, you can also listen to mine. And then when you're done is when you're going to read and record your version of both the classical and the ecclesiastical. Let me show you how that's going to work. Let me show you how to use Vocaroo. So in Vocaroo, you're going to go to vocaroo.com. You may have to click allow up at the top. So you're going to begin recording by clicking the red button, and it's recording. Now, if it doesn't do that for you automatically, it might be because there's a little box that pops up that needs you to click allow for the microphone. Okay, you're going to click this when you're done, and it'll allow you to listen to it. Button, and it's recording. Now, if you don't like what you recorded, you're going to click the red button, and it'll automatically go to recording again. Then if you do like what you recorded and that's what you're going to submit, click the save and share button. And then what you're going to provide to me is this link. You can copy the whole link to the clipboard by clicking that button right there. And where are you going to turn it in? You're going to turn it in on the assignment Latin pronunciation. So right now it's grayed out because at the time that I'm recording this, it's just a little bit early, and it's not out yet for you, but I have made it. So you're going to have the YouTube video here. You're going to have this is the video that the sub is going to be playing. You've got a link to Vocaroo, so you don't have to type it in. You can just click the link. But then in this assignment, in the comments, not the public comments, but in the comments that just you and I will see, unless you want everyone to be able to listen to it. That's where I want you to put the link to this assignment and then click turn it in. All right. So let me know if you have any questions. Even though I'm gone, that doesn't mean that I'm unavailable and I'm not checking my email, because I am. So I'll have you get to work on this right away. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in a few days.